ask then, it said in the Auckland Transport plan for 2015-2025, this is a private project. They said, oh, Skypath's not in our cycle schedule because, oh, this is a private project. So you're saying that because the council can't get around the way, if it was a pure PPP, it would be a project, private project, but it's not a pure PPP because council's putting the money in to back it up, isn't it? Is that correct?
Well, my understanding of what you've been asked to do is to essentially underwrite the public-private partnership, but it's not a private project. It's not a project fully funded by a private actor in the market who will cover all of the costs. It's a hybrid PPP as described in the report. There is an underwriting component, but essentially the council owns the Skypath. It's just been built, operated, funded through the public-private partnership. So it is your project, it's your decision to make, and in my view, it's a significant decision you're making.
Okay, thank you. So your synopsis is that we should go through a special consultative process to determine what the views of the community is before we launch into this. Can you just confirm that, and can you just give me some understanding of your background as far as your qualifications in law, please?
Yes, absolutely. My opinion is that the decision you're making is to commence a significant activity. You must amend your long-term plan to include that, consult with your community under the special consultative procedure, and then make your decision. In terms of my qualifications, I have a PhD in local government law. I've got a law degree, a master's in law, and a PhD in law. I've spent probably the last 20 years doing local government work, including inside Manukau and Auckland City Councils. I worked in the private sector law firms for 8 years, primarily focused on local government law, and now I'm a barrister sole and a consultant.
Thank you, Councillor Wood.
I just got one other question.
No, I've got someone else. I've got Councillor
I've just got one other
I'll come back to you,
okay,
Councillor Wood, if that's the case.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And most of my question was actually around the PPP and how that worked, and those questions have pretty much been answered. Thank you for that, Grant. But my understanding how the traditional private-public partnership works is that a government body determines that they want a piece of vital infrastructure, and they then find a private partner to go into partnership with them for that infrastructure. This is somewhat different, isn't it? Because this is not led by the council saying that they want that piece of infrastructure. This is another group coming along and saying this piece of infrastructure is something that you can do through a public partnership. So it's not a public partnership in the sense that this is a vital piece of infrastructure that the council has said it really requires. Would that be correct?
Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I can. We don't consider that it is a vital piece of infrastructure. We consider that primarily it's a private tourism and leisure facility because 87.5% of its patronage is the tourism and leisure market. So that's effectively what this facility is. Its transportation function is at best very minor. Even the patronage projections which Council describes as conservative, which we describe as over-pumped by about 90%, but if we take the Council's patronage projections, this facility will take a year to transport the same number of commuters as the bridge does in a day. If, however, you correct the patronage projections to genuinely and properly considered in our view, patronage projections, it'll take about 5 to 10 years for this facility to transport the number of people that a harbour bridge does in a day. So it really does self-describe itself as a tourism leisure facility, and a major one, in a residential area that isn't zoned for any commercial activity.
Mr Chair, can I just have a quick follow-up question on that?
Very
In terms
quick,
of-
councillor
Yeah,
Grace.
just a
I
real
remember
quick-
you wanting me
because
to
in terms of patronage-
enforce the standing orders.
Yeah, well, just a supplementary question, Mr Chairman. In terms of the patronage figures which you claim are somewhat heroic, has there been any work done in terms of how many cars that will remove from the road, from the bridge on a day to ease congestion?
Well, as far as the neighbourhoods are concerned, the neighbourhoods that deal with SkyPath's entry portals, what happens is that they suffer a huge influx of cars. There's no saving of cars for those areas whatsoever. And in fact, rather than being a fuel-saving green activity, like any tourism activity, it attracts cars. It attracts tourism buses. It attracts the consumption of petrol and fossil fuels and the people that are driving around in the cars to get there. So it's not a green, it can't be described as a green activity. This is a tourism activity. And whereas I'm not in any way opposed to tourism, in the right place and done in the right way. That's what this is. It's not a fuel-saving transport link at heart at all.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman,
Councillor Craigs.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if we might be able to get those figures though at some, because they haven't really been answered, in how many cars.
We will
this
ask that
take off
question in the
road. So I
reports,
hope
yep.
somebody can give us
Yep.
that answer, that question.
I think we should just also clarify, though, to Mr Clark, that certainly all the emails all the councillors have got in the last week or two are not, none of them are from tourists. They're all from the public who want to actually have active transportation. So we want you to know that. So.
Yes, I'm really only quoting their own statistics. So whether their own statistics are wrong is not my real problem here. I'm just saying that their own statistics make it very clear that this is a tourism and leisure facility, not a transport facility.
Certainly is how they present it. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Thanks for your presentation. I just wanted to ask you, Dr Hewitson, in our report there's several paragraphs on public engagement which talk about all the things that you talked about in consulting on significant events, and it lists several places where we've consulted in the long-term plan, there's been submissions. So I just wonder how you see that corresponding with what you said, where you said we've had no engagement or no consultation.
What I've said is that Section 97 of the Act requires, before you commence a significant activity, to explicitly include that in your long-term plan and to consult on that. So I agree, you have done some informal consultation in the past. You did include in your last long-term plan a signal that you might consider SkyPath into the future, but you have not explicitly complied with Section 97 and included in your long-term plan clearly what you're intending to do in terms of this decision, that you will progress with SkyPath on a public-private partnership, and this will require an underwrite from the council and will likely involve, if that underwrite is activated, a ratepayer contribution to that underwrite.
Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
So I'm just trying to get the point of Section 97. I think the long-term plan amounts to about $70 billion worth of expenditure, but coming back to SkyPath, is your argument that the reference in the long-term plan in regard to the council's intention regarding SkyPath is inadequate, and that the people, or perhaps Northcote, are unaware that the council is supporting Skypath. Is that the argument?
Yes, the argument is before you commence to make this decision,
Yeah.
which in my view is to commence a significant activity.
Is what?
To commence a significant activity,
Okay.
to commence the Skypath proposal, you must explicitly include that in the long-term plan, and you haven't explicitly included that, particularly the underwrite and the exposure of ratepayers to that cost in your long-term plan. You've signalled in the last long-term plan that you might do that, but you haven't clearly, explicitly said you would.
Would you not agree, given the council has been engaged in this process since 2011, that the community and the people of Auckland are well aware? In fact, the council is engaged because of public pressure. Do you not agree that in terms of the long-term plan and public awareness, the council has fulfilled that?
No. No. You have informally communicated with your public. You've included a signal in your last long-term plan, but you haven't explicitly said that you will commence this activity in your current long-term plan, and in my view, you must.
Would you not agree that in terms of the four-notice in the long-term plan, that recommendation C does exactly that?
Recommendation C doesn't comply with section 97. So recommendation C says we will put this in the next long-term plan.
Or annual plan?
Or annual plan,
Yeah.
or long-term plan. But if you're about to commence a significant activity, it must be in your existing long-term plan.
Well, it is.
No, you've signalled in your current long-term plan that you might.
Okay.
Yep.
Taking your argument, we'd just go round and round on circle, really, wouldn't we?
Well, I think council would probably need to agree to disagree.
Okay, thank you.
So I think the issue is, Grant, you would agree that it's a matter of the definition of, is this a significant project? And it is a big project for Auckland, but as Councillor Lee was referring to, there's a huge budget here, and is this significant in the context of the overall budget? So that's where we agree to disagree, I think. I've got Councillor Brewer.
Thank you, Mr Chair. In addition to what Mr Hewson's saying as far as Section 97 requirements and potential shortcomings around public consultation and process, you've raised, Kevin, that you have other concerns about our timing, and I think today's presentation is more so about our timing than anything else from you. And I suppose I want to just get a recap again on what significant costs should we be confirming and what significant assessments around structural and construction assessments should we be doing before we send off the Chief Executive to enter all necessary agreements.
Thank you for your question, Mr Brewer, Councillor Brewer. It seems to me that Council has to be very clear, both with itself and with its ratepayer public, as to the risk that's involved in engaging with Skypath in the manner that it is, and that means that it must be very clear about the capital cost of the project, and it cannot be until NZTA does its part of that job. It must be very clear about its running costs, and we're not privy, of course, to those, but we do know that the last published approach that the applicant had to running costs was that they were going to employ 2 wardens. You will, I hope, have seen our video which showed exactly the same patronage intensity as has been approved and is needed for Skypath viability, and it had 2 wardens every 25 metres. We're talking hundreds of wardens, not 2. So unless the business case has been changed recently to accommodate the addition of hundreds of wardens, then you won't know its running costs. And of course, driving everything about Skypath, all of its bad effects and all of its problems, is patronage. And the reality is that not a soul in this room knows what its patronage is going to be, and the reason for that, that its patronage isn't going to be determined by council's quite numerous patronage assessments, which we happen to disagree with. Its peak patronage is going to be determined by NZTA and NZTA's patronage limitations.